Key terms for today. Farm. A farm is an economic unit that engages in production and the sale of agricultural produce and services to gain a profit. Now, key parts of this definition is 1, economic unit. 2, agricultural produce and services to gain a profit. Key terms, profit and economic unit. Let's continue. Production, land, labor, capital, management, value chain, supply chain, consumption, and marketing. Now, let's see how we can best explain some of our the economic functions. We have 3 economic functions, and today, Farmer Joe will assist us. Now, Farmer Joe is driving his tractor. Here we have our 3 economic functions, which are marketing, consumption, and production. Our engine would have been our production. And as in every big engine, we have different parts. So production has various factors. So we have a big engine, right? So for this tractor to move, it needs an engine. Great. Next, we have consumption. Consumption would have been the fuel behind our engine. So in the movement, we look at production, and it says best with our consumption. So both rely on each other. If you have a big engine and you have A-grade gas, what would you need next? Old Farmer Joe, right? He would have been the driver. So marketing is the driver behind production and consumption. So each factor would have its own role in getting the economy moving. Understood? Great. So now let's break them down. Let's look at production. Production is an economic activity that engages in the management and use of normal agricultural operation for the production of a farm commodity. So an economic activity that engages management. So how we utilize all the factors to ensure we get a profitable outcome. That would have been looking at production. Now, production focuses mainly on 2 things. Production focuses on goods and services. Now here, goods and services. Production provides goods and services to satisfy people's need and their wants. Again, production is geared to provide goods and services to satisfy people's needs and their wants. Listen how we can look at the benefits. How best we can remember the benefits of production. Now, if we improve production, increase production would increase what? Would increase your wealth. Next, increased wealth would automatically, we're going to have a better economy. So increased wealth would promote economic welfare. And if you have economic welfare, what would improve? Your standard of living. So the 3 main benefits of production is that we look on increased wealth, it promotes economic welfare, and it improves the standard of living. Those are the 3 benefits of production on the farm. Now next we're looking at the processes or the functions that are involved in production. Now, production functions has its inputs and its outputs. The inputs of production would have been the factors of production. So the factors of production are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And time again, I'll be using the term enterprise or management. So these are the factors or the inputs of production. Now the outputs of production would have been the end result of production. That would have been goods and services. Great. Now, outputs are, example, tractor, crops, a refrigerator, computer. Those are all different types of goods and services that would have been the end result of putting in your business. Now, the factors of production, let's highlight them. The factors of production are land, labor, capital, and management. Again, the factors of production are land, labor, capital, management, or enterprise. These 4 factors are what keeps production going. 4 factors of production. There are different aspects to best outline. Now, let me ask you a question, if you're listening. Now, the question is, Mrs. Labor Omnia Winkett lives in Jamaica. She's leased 1 hectare of land and decides to start a poultry business. List the factors of production she would need for a profitable outcome. So Mrs. Labor Omnia lives in Winkett. She's leased 1 hectare of land and decides to start a poultry business. List the factors of production she would need for a profitable outcome. Tick tock. You guys were listening before? What happened? Let's go. Great. I'm assuming you know what the 4 factors are, which are land, labor, capital, and management. So what would she need? No, she would not need land because clearly it states that she was leased land. So she would not need land as a factor. She would now need the additional factors, which are labor, capital, management, or enterprise. Very good. I know you're listening. Now, let's look further on the types of production. There are 3 types of production. We have primary production, secondary production, and tertiary production. Again, we have 3 types of production: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Let's look at the first one, primary. Begin. Primary production looks at the raw material and goods produced initially. So, after production on the farm, what is my result? So, for example, I'm planting a crop. I harvested guavas. I reared chicken. So, my raw material would have been my chicken and my guava. So, those are classified as primary production on the farm. Now, I want to convert my production to give it a longer life. So, I move into a different category of production to secondary. So, secondary production looks at converting my raw material into a different state. So, now I can turn my guava into guava jam. I can turn my chicken into sausage or frankfurters or bologna. I process my good. So hence I would move to secondary production. Next, I look at the other stage, which would have been tertiary production. Tertiary production highlights the services that are given. Now, services to include commercial, technical, and professional services. Commercial services speaks of maybe owning a farm store that you would sell fertilizer and feed to farmers. We look at technical services like a teacher, an extension officer. These are what you would offer as technical support. Then we look at the professional support, consultation. So therefore you have an animal who is sick. You refer to your veterinarian. So these are a few persons or aspects of professional, technical, and commercial services. Now, let's break down our 4 factors of production. First one is land. Land refers to all natural resources found in the sea and on land. Land refers to all natural resources found in the sea and on land. Land is the most essential factor. It is the most essential, right? So therefore, if you're venturing into production, the first thing you must consider is land. Location, location, location. Where am I going to operate my business? Right, next thing we look at as land. Land is a limiting factor that cannot be replaced. Self-explanatory. 3, the value of land increases over time. So the value of land can increase based on the natural resources found there. Look on how fertile the land is, the location of the land. So if it's found in a certain region where we have rich soil, rich in nutrients that can support plant growth, the cost of it would have been really high. Natural resource. If a land occupies maybe like, we have oil found there, that land will be increased in value based on the fact that we have natural resources found there. Now, to every factor, you may have a few problems. Let's look at land. Now, problems that are associated with land. First thing, increasing population creates demand on land. Increased population creates demand for land. So we have an increased population in an area, and that this would cause the demand for land to go up because we have more persons wanting the land to use based on the increased amount of persons in an area. We look on too at the competition for housing and industry and agriculture. So housing does compete with agriculture in regards to the need for the land. Then we look at 3, the increase in demand for land leads to an increase in the price for the land. Now these 3 are problems associated with land. Now these 3 problems can be highlighted further. Now, we are looking at the problems that affects land. First, increase in population creates a demand for land. So due to the increase in population in an area, it would rise to a competition for housing and agriculture, which leads to the second problem. 3, increasing demand for the land would lead to an increase in the price for the land. So the price would eventually go up based on the demand. And if you're applying knowledge, you would know that an increase in demand for something would, if I have 2 things I'm selling something, and I want to increase or sell something, I should say, if I have 2 persons buying, I'm going to increase my price. So that's how we would consider having the price go up for land. Now let's look at a few solutions. First, allocated greenbelt or zoning of a few areas, of which I know you may see along the way. These areas are areas designated just for farming. So you wouldn't have any permanent structures being erected on these buildings, on these land areas, 2, we look at financial assistance to acquire these land. Problem, solution, aid. Many farmers need loan to actually access land. And 3, subdivide land. Break up large parcels of land into smaller pieces and allow a few farmers to lease and then, practice farming. Let's move further to our other factor. The other factor is labor. Labor, this is the human effort needed in production of a good or a service. Now, labor, we have 3 types of labor. We have family labor, operator labor, and hired labor. Family labor lends to a farmer operating the farm with his family. So, for example, a small poultry unit, mom, son, and father. So, Marcy and Andre operates their poultry farm. This would have been family labor on a farm. Then we look further to operator labor, where we look at a farmer does everything on the farm. The farmer is the manager, the farmer is the consultant, he's the laborer, he markets his own business. The farmer does everything on the farm. So there it will lend to him doing actually everything, inclusive of the labor. Now, hired labor would lend to people being employed to work for you. Now, here we have temporary and we have permanent. Temporary labor lends to maybe employing seasonal persons. So if you're planting soil, there's a time when you're going to harvest your soil, right? So you would employ persons to come to work seasonally for you. And we look at permanent labor where persons are employed and they come to work every day. Permanent workers. Now, let's look to a few of the problems that affects labor. First problem, rural-urban drift. This term came up last week. It's here again. Now, rural-urban drift speaks to persons leaving the rural area or the country where we have the farmlands to come to cities to live for a better life. Now, this poses a problem for labor because if I have 3 kids and my kids decide they want to leave, who will work for me? If I want to employ somebody who lives down yonder, nobody's there. They have all moved to Kingston or St. Andrew or St. Catherine to live. Now, we look at low wages. In some instances, we look at the farm, not, the cost or the fee that's attached to working a day on the farm is not as cost effective, or doesn't pay much for many persons. So the wage sometimes is a bit low for many persons. We look at 3, the psychological attitude. Many persons assume that farming lends to slavery. So the mindset is that nobody wants to work on the farm. It's too hard, tilling the soil. It just reeks slavery just for some persons. 4, demographical changes. We look at birth rate. Back then, my grandmother had about 13 kids. Her daughter, my mother, Gwendolyn, had 2. So what you realize that many persons now the birth rate has reduced. So hence we have less persons around in regards to labor force on a farm. We look at gender. We look at migration where persons may leave the area to go to live somewhere else. Now, solution to a few of these problems. 1, educate the public. Persons need to be aware of the benefits involved in agriculture, the job opportunities involved in agriculture. These are all important aspects that persons can turn a blind eye to, or they are not informed to the benefits of farming. Next, we look at provide basic infrastructure. Came up last week, it's here again. Providing roads, buildings, modern buildings, access to Wi-Fi. These are things that would keep persons intact and, keeping up to time. Now we look at incentive programs. So programs that can promote farmers, like giving them a reduced cost in a few of the goods that they have. If I'm going to buy chemical, I would pay less. I would give away maybe free seedlings to some farmers, free chicks to few farmers. This actually encourages farmers to continue in their labor force or their production line. Next factor is capital. Capital speaks on compromising of money and all building equipment, tools, machinery, plants, livestock. It's used in production of agricultural goods and services. So this factor looks on 2 different aspects, a working aspect and a fixed aspect. These are all factors that employ or its use in production. Capital is used to secure farmers' outsource money. So for example, how or where farmers get money from. So this aspect lends to loans. Loans, how they access money to increase production. Now capital has 2 classifications here. So we're going to look at fixed capital and working capital. Now fixed capital, we look on items that have a useful life for more than a year. So after a year's time, you can't exhaust these items. So for example, building, machinery, they're being used for a long period of time or more than 1 year, right? Then we look at the working capital. Working, as the word would imply, means it's constantly being replenished. It's a revolving process. So for example, we look on feed. Each time you use feed, you have to replace it. So it's constantly being used up and replaced. So this normally it doesn't last for a year. It normally lasts for less than a year. Cash. We look at cash as an example of working capital. And cash, for example, I'm going to purchase something, I have to replace my cash each time I use. So this is why we consider them working capital. So we have 2 types of capitals. We have fixed and we have working capital on our farm. Now, to the following, we have what you call rewards. Now, rewards are on a farm for more than one reason. So let me look here at, let's go back to it, or rewards on the farm. Now, rewards on the farm. We spoke about a few of the factors to include land, labor, and capital. Now, let's look at some of the benefits of each of them. So, for example, land. Somebody who owns land, they're able to rent their land. They're able to lease the land. That's benefit to them, right? So they can earn money from owning or having this factor called land. 2, we look at a reward for labor. Now, I'm a worker on the farm, and I'm going to come to work for you. I'm going to sell my labor to you. So you have to pay me wages. So a benefit or a reward system to labor would have been me collecting my weekly or daily or monthly wage. Next, we look at capital. There's a reward function attached to capital. Now, the providers of financial capitals are able to receive interest. So, for example, I'm going to lend you $10, and when you're going to pay me back in total, I want $150. That means I'm going to make money on what I loan you, right? So there's an interest attached to lending money. Next, we look at enterprise or management. In enterprise, the whole benefit or reward of enterprise is profit. Remember, a farm is an economic unit that drives a result of profit. Right? So let's go further. Now, I'm assuming you all are listening. Let's take a break to look at an activity. The activity goes, listen, in the table below are a group of solutions associated with the factors of production. To which factor does each solution belong? Let's go. So, I have the table here. I'm just going to call and you're going to tell me or say out loud to yourselves, which factor would each apply. So let's look. First one, green belt and zoning. I'm hearing good. Right, that is land. Great. Basic infrastructure is attached to which one? Great. You guys learning, man. You're listening. Good. So we look at subdivision. Subdivide. Land. Great. Educate the public. Land and labor. Because remember, educating the public is the ease for many problems that we have in Jamaica. Just by educating. Because sometimes persons aren't aware until they are educated on a topic. Right? So let's move next into management or final factor. Now, management focuses on all other factors of production. Management determines the success or the failure of any production line. So on the farm, it seeks to speak on how best we monitor or manage our land, our labor, and our capital. So we have to have good labor force, monitor it well, monitor our land, keep a track of our business with the capital. Once we do that, it's considered management or enterprise. Now this gives rise to if your business will fail or the business will make a profit. So it involves analyzing, decision making, budgeting, and absorption of the farm's outcome. Next, we look at a good farmer manages his resources well and makes a profit. Simple. If you're a great farmer, the end result is always profit. Now, we've looked at production as a whole. Now we're going to look at the other economic function, which is consumption. Now, consumption speaks to this. A consumer focused activity that incorporates purchases and the utilizing of goods and services. So consumption leads to utilizing a good or using a service. So that's what we consider consumption, which lends to a consumer. There are 4 factors that we're going to look at, which is health, income level, religion, and aesthetics. Now, picture this. Health, based on consumption. Now, many persons now, they are leaning towards a healthy lifestyle. So they're going to pull away from a few items. So no longer would they want fatty food with high cholesterol. They're going to lean to vegetables, melons, fruit, all that stuff. So that would have been pulling away from one source to another, which would affect consumption of a good because persons are more leaning towards a health-focused lifestyle, healthy lifestyle. Next, we look at income. Income affects what you buy at the shop. So, for example, on Sundays, mommy and daddy would cook chicken and mutton, right? But because of income, they're going to only buy one. So let's say now this Sunday, you're going to only get chicken. So because of your income, you would contribute to what your parent or what the consumer is willing to purchase. And 3, we looked at religion. So Seventh-day Adventists, for an example, these persons do not consume pork. So That would affect the consumption of pork because of religion. Great. And like me, I eat with my eyes, so aesthetics. So how something looks will determine what you want. So if you're at the line and you're buying food at maybe a buffet line, like a few restaurants, you look at what looks nice to you with the eyes. What looks juicy and mouth-watering, like a burger, right? So you would want to buy the burger because of the picture that you see. Next. Marketing. So marketing, as we said before, marketing speaks on what drives the economy. So marketing links consumption and it links production. So marketing promotes goods and services flow from the producer to the consumer. So we look at production moving through to consumers. We look at supply moving into demand. These activities, they entertain vendors and the merchants. Now, marketing has four functions. We look at merchandising, handling, processing, and supporting. Now, in merchandising, we look at buying and selling of items, and this involves trading and promoting. We look at handling in marketing, which involves transporting goods, sorting goods, grading goods, assembling goods. These all are based on the handling of a good. Then we look at an activity that is involved. We look at processing and distributing to a retailer. Then we look at processing. When you're processing a good, you look at labeling a good, packaging, manufacturing a good, and this normally involves you satisfying what the customer wants, right? And lastly, supporting. Supporting leads to finances, standardizations, risks, and assessment. Now, what it entails is how the item flows smoothly from the production line to a consumer. That's what we link to supporting. So, what comes next is how we link together these functions. Value and supply chain. Now, value and supply chain. The value chain looks on the process in which a company adds value to its raw material to produce a product. Eventually, it will be sold to consumers. So, value chain speaks on recreation of our raw material, giving it value. So, for example, if I have an increase in production, a high supply of tomatoes, I'm going to add value to this tomato so I can present it to my consumers. So I'm going to change my tomato to a paste, and then I'm going to start to bottle ketchup. So I'm adding value to my raw material, right? Now, after adding value, we look at the supply chain. The supply chain represents all the steps required to get this product to the consumer. So after me rearranging my tomato to a paste, what I do from that stage until it reaches my consumer would have been my supply chain. And I know you've heard a few of these terms before. Now, let's look at this diagram to best explain. The value chain gives companies a competitive edge, an advantage when you add value to your product. And two, the supply chain leads to overall consumer satisfaction. So the diagram here speaks on value. So the farmers will create their good. It's then processed or changed. Then we move to our wholesalers and distributors. So now my tomato paste will now move from my production line here to the wholesalers and distributors. Then it moves to the retailers, shops, right? Then we move to you, the consumers who purchase. This is a flow from value moving to the supply chain. Now these all interrelate as it promotes production of any raw material. Now for today we have covered a few topics. As these topics were diverted and went back straight to some of our key terms. Now before I move to my key terms, let me ask you a question. Question says, which of the following is not considered a factor of production? This is a CSEC question. So which of the following is not considered a factor of production? So I have option A, land, option B, capital, C, marketing, and D, management. I'm sure they have some bright girls out here and boys, you know. And right, marketing, very good. So I know you guys are listening. Now, today we looked at a few topics. Now, what we looked at today was farm production, land, labor, management, marketing, and consumption. So let's do a recap. So for today, we identified what a farm is. It's an economic unit that is involved in production. We highlighted production. Production lends to improving standard of living. We look on wide variety of how we can utilize the focus of production. And production focuses on goods and services. Next, we highlighted the factors, which are land, labor, and capital and management. So land is the most important factor of production, right? And land also incurs problems, which are good. You know, you guys are really listening. So land incurs problems to include availability of land, maybe an increase in production based on population, So these are a few factors that affect land, and you know we can solve these problems by looking at green belting an area and providing financial assistance. Next, we look at labor, and there were 3 types of labor. We looked at hired labor, operator labor, and family labor. Family lends to having an entire family working on the farm. Operator, the farmer does everything on the farm. And we look at hired labor, where employment is taken on by the farmer. Then we look at the capital. Capital speaks to how we access information regarding our financial status on the farm. So for example, capital could have been working or fixed. And we know working is aspects on the land, on the property that has to be replenished over time. So for example, I have to replenish my feed, my fertilizers. These are all important aspects that we have to keep on replenishing. Hence, the term is called working. And we looked at fixed, which lasts for more than a year. Great. An example of fixed assets on the farm are buildings and machinery and a few tools. Next, we highlighted management. As we said before, management gives rise to the success and failure of any business. So how we monitor or manage land, labor, and capital would speak to how best we are going to make a profit or if we're going to make a loss on the farm. Next, we look at marketing. Marketing is what links consumption and production. Marketing is the driver of the economy. It tends to process a good, supporting the good, and seems to the flow of the good from the production line right until it reaches the consumer. Now this looks at consumption. Consumption speaks to how we utilize our goods and or services. So I do hope that you guys were listening into what transpired in today's class. Now last week we had a student who actually was very successful. She actually emailed me a few of her questions. Now, the student from last week that did very well was Nelisha Smith-Ferguson. She is the student of the week because she's following up and she's keeping abreast with everything. Now, I hope you would become one of my student of the week for next week. So, how can you do that? Answer these few questions. You can take a picture or you can take a quick snap of what's happening in regards to screenshot. So question one, why is land often the essential factor of production? 2, we look at which factor of production do you think is most important and why. 3, is labor always important to make a product? And 4, is there a factor that is not necessary to make a product? 5, what is the difference between fixed and circulating capital? So in closing for today, our thought for today, or the quote for the week is, investments in agriculture are the best weapons against hunger and poverty, and they have made life better for billions of people. Again, investments in agriculture are the best weapons against hunger and poverty, and they have made life better for billions of people.